Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy. Today is Friday, July 5th, 2024, which is celebrated Independence Day in the United States. But in the church, we're celebrating Friday of the 13th week in Ordinary Time. It's also the optional memorial of St. Anthony Mary Zaccaria, and also the optional memorial of St. Elizabeth of Portugal. Today's Gospel comes to us from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 9, verses 9 through 13. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the customs post. He said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. While he was at table in his house, many tax collectors and sinners came and sat with Jesus and his disciples. The Pharisees saw this and said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" He heard this and said, "Those who are well do not need a physician, but the sick do. Go and learn the meaning of the words, 'I desire mercy, not sacrifice.' I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." In today's Gospel, we heard the calling of St. Matthew, and the passage gives us an excellent opportunity to reflect on our own vocations, and this in three ways. First, the time at which Christ calls. Second, our sinfulness. And third, our obligation to spread the good news. So time, our own sinfulness, our own unworthiness, and also our obligation to preach the gospel. Regarding the first, the great doctor of the church, St. John Chrysostom, asks why Jesus didn't call Matthew when he called Peter, John, and all the rest. Well, Chrysostom answers by saying that Christ called his apostles, just as he calls each one of us, when they were ready. He knew when Matthew's heart would be open, and it was at that moment he called. For each of us, too, that call to serve Christ in some way might have come sooner or later in life. But in the end, what matters is God's loving providence. Because in God's providence, nothing is early, nothing is late, but everything is exactly on time. Our call comes when and how God knew we would answer. And so it doesn't matter whether it was earlier or later than others. That call is always a gift, no matter how or when it came. Regarding the second, our own sinfulness, we should recall that in Jesus' day, tax collectors often charged much more than they should have, and they were agents of the Romans, the conquerors and oppressors of the Jewish people. Matthew was hated by his fellow Jews and regarded as a sinner. And nonetheless, Christ calls him to a new life as an apostle. Matthew captures this beautifully in the Gospel when he writes, "And he got up." In Greek, the word is anistete me, which also means to rise from the dead. In our lives, too, God calls us up from the midst of a sinful world. And in spite of our own sins, he calls us to rise up from those sins and failings to follow him with our whole hearts. Think of it, as Catholics, particularly as religious, we're sinners called from among sinners to minister to and intercede for sinners. Thirdly, and related to this, we can consider that our vocation, our calling, is not only for ourselves, but also for the good of our families, the church, and the world at large. Luke tells us that Matthew threw a feast at his own house, and we can imagine the surprise of his friends, all of his fellow tax collectors, when they heard that the well-known rabbi would come and dine with them. Had it been anyone but Matthew, the tax collectors either wouldn't have been invited, or they wouldn't have believed the invitation. Like evangelizes like. So Christ used Matthew, as he wants to use us, to draw sinners closer to himself. In fact, St. Thomas Aquinas says that we show that we've really personally converted to God when we invite others to draw near to him, when we invite others and bring others to Christ. Pope St. John Paul II said that a religious vocation is a gift, freely given and freely accepted. It's a profound expression of God's love towards us that requires a total love towards Christ on our part. In a sense, too, that's also true for married life or any sort of vocation, right? It's a way for us to love God above everything else. In the end, every vocation is an unrepeatable act of God's love, a story of unique and unrepeatable love. That's true of Matthew's vocation and also of our own vocations. Today, then, as we celebrate the calling of St. Matthew, through the intercession of Mary, Queen of the Apostles, let's ask for the grace to follow Christ our Lord all the days of our lives, and to be thankful for the many gifts of his love.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed hearing the gospel and homily, I invite you to share it with someone you know who may also find it rewarding, and also to subscribe to the Catholic Voice channel. Please see in the description below if you would like to receive a text message for each daily gospel and homily. Please also keep our missionary priests throughout the world in your prayers. Thank you, and God bless.